everyone, I'm Christopher Flood the Drummer Norris, CEO of Techbook Online and star of The Week That Was. A new segment heard every Friday evening during the 6 o'clock hour on 900 AM WURD and 900 AM WURD.com. As you can see, I don't have a drum set here with me today, but I am here with a very special friend, Mr. Juwan Bennett. He's a teaching assistant at Temple University in the Criminal Justice Department, and he's also a scholar, a doctoral student, the only black male doctoral student in the program, correct?
Yes, yes.
That's really important to know. This is a new segment called Report and Research. We want to bring you the biggest stories through the lens of academia and thought leadership, and we're in Philadelphia. There's no way we cannot talk about President Obama addressing more than 3,000 people yesterday about criminal justice reform. I think we can all agree a year ago this wouldn't have happened, right?
No.
And what do you attribute this to?
Well, I think it's primarily because all the grassroots organizations that's been going on, the Black Lives Matter campaign, people...
Techbook Online.
Yeah, I think in this new knowledge-based economy, people try to figure out these issues. The millennials, I think a lot of people from the protests that I went to when I saw and watched...
So you're saying it's the community who pushed this narrative that made Mr. Obama talk about it yesterday?
Yes, I think it's their effort over time has brought it to the mainstream attention that you can't ignore it now.
Yeah, and you know, that's what he actually said. He said we can't ignore it. Criminal justice reform is an issue that we can't ignore. So let's talk about some of the things that he said real quick. He's going to be the first U.S. president, the first sitting U.S. president to visit a prison. You and I, a couple months ago, we published a piece that said why the next mayor of Philadelphia should spend the night in jail. And we got a lot of blowback from a lot of people about that. Lynn Abraham said, "Oh, there's no way I'm spending a night in prison. It's not necessary." But Mr. Obama is setting a precedent, and you said that it's evidence-based. What does that mean?
When we say things are evidence-based, either policy or intervention, basically the decisions that will be made come from research. They come out of the literature or the statistics that we find. So we don't just say, hey,
we as in scholars.
We as a scholar, statisticians, social scientists. Basically what happens is we don't say, you know what, I'm going to go visit a prison, or I think I'm going to do this policy. But where's the research? Where's your survey? Where's the data? Where's the numbers? And so whenever we make...
So what numbers do you think Mr. Obama looked at to say, okay, it's time for me to go visit a prison? And were those numbers available during when Bush was in office? Why is it that this is just happening now?
Well, I mean, we have the numbers. I mean, the employment rate is proliferated. Unemployment rate, I should say. The amount of African Americans we have in prison. So when you think about black males, so there's African Americans make up a small percentage of the U.S. population, but make up almost a bigger percentage when you think about in jails and prisons. These numbers have been here, but I think so too. This push we talk about qualitative methods, things that are not so much like hard stats, but we have things, stories, interviews with people who have gone out in the community, and participant action research, right? So
participatory action research.
We call it PAR. Yeah.
PAR, okay.
And so what happens is now when President Obama says we can't ignore these issues, we can't ignore it because the community is right there at the onset, right?
And when he's saying we, he didn't say me, he's talking about we. So if he's going to visit prison, there's things that he's going to do. What's the we part? Where's the community come in at when we're talking about prison reform, decrowding prisons, bail reductions? What is the community? What can they, when they do at home that's watching this, what can they do to push the needle and so that Mr. Obama isn't out on an island by himself in this one?
Well, I think
even though this issue does have bipartisan reform, I mean, bipartisan support, you have Republican and Democrats that are saying it's really time to do something.
And I think so, like, when you think about, when he says we, the community, remember, contrary to popular belief, the community is the expert. They're the expert because their family members have gone through it.
You guys are the expert. We just talk. You guys are really the expert.
I mean, I haven't been incarcerated. I haven't had, my brother murdered. I haven't, been through the whole rehabilitation process and try to reintegrate back into society. I haven't had my voting rights removed. I've read it in the textbook. I've studied it. I've crunched the numbers. I've talked with people. But until you actually go through the circumstance, the community has the leverage. So one of the things is to kind of commend the communities to do what they're already doing, to share their stories, to share their knowledge. So people like me, I can never speak for the participants that I researched. Only thing I can do is amplify their voices. So I think it's the community sharing the experiences with people like Techbook and with people in academia so that we can really understand. And we call ourselves social scientists because we want to figure out social problems and the things that we can do to do better. And
so the three things Mr. Obama talked about yesterday were what? 3 C's.
He talked about community, he talked about courtrooms, and he talked about cell lines.
In courtrooms, there was an article that said that there's not very many many black elected prosecutors, but you say that doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter.
And you probably have people at the computer screens like, what? But it doesn't matter?
Because what's the first thing he gave us? He gave us community.
Right.
I thought community was important because when you think about community, that's where the whole prevention comes in to me, right? So when we think about community, the community has leverage in these stories that we can prevent adolescents and people from even entering in the criminal justice system.
How? Pay attention.
Yes, how? That's a great question. So how? So one of the things that when we talk about prevention is how do we keep black boys, black girls, white boys from entering the criminal? People in general.
But particularly black and brown people, because we seem to be getting the short end of the stick here. I'm just saying.
I don't know, call me crazy. But one of the things we can do, so small things, little things. I was reading this article, here's the research base, right? A non-cognitive trait called grit. Grit is described as the ability to overcome difficult circumstances, to have a mental attitude that you will kind of overcome or get the best of the situation. Those things that can be taught in the classroom can be instituted.
But wait, just so we don't move too fast, you're saying if you have grit, it doesn't matter if there's a black or white prosecutor? Because I want to make sure I understand why that doesn't matter before we jump to prevention.
Well, what happens is we don't have to deal with the courtroom in of itself if we have prevention. Also, one of the things when we talk about black or white prosecutor, we have to understand that the system is overrun and overbooked. Meaning, though, the court used to be focused, their goal was justice. We focused on the motto, we rather let 1,000 guilty people go free than keep one innocent man in jail. That's how the court used to operate. Now, because it's overworked, because of the various get tough on crime laws and the sentencing reform issues that President Barack Obama is trying to fix, the goal is not so much on justice, but removing the court docket because it's very numerous. So you have
So that is part of what his reform is trying to tear down the workload or mitigate that workload?
And mitigate the sentencing reform as a whole. So we have mandatory minimum. So mandatory minimum says if you do a certain crime, that no matter what the circumstances, you have to get 5 years or 10 years, and there's no mitigating.
And that policy came up through the 80s, right, with the crack cocaine.
Exactly.
And it wasn't really an academic response. It was emotional. It wasn't evidence-based, as Mr. Obama is visiting a prison is, right? It was just, let's just...
And it's emotional, it's also time efficient, right? So we have to move the docket. If you're, selling drugs or you have a gun charge, bam, it's easy to slap you those 5 years, and so we can move to the next case and move the docket around. And so we talk about courtrooms, whether you have a black prosecutor or a white prosecutor, it's essentially more of a role thing than a race thing, if that makes sense. So it's not so much of a race thing, it's more of a role thing.
And what's the role?
And the role is, here it is. So prosecutors and defense attorneys, they get a set salary. So unlike private attorneys who they can take cases and charge a big retainer at the end, no matter if they move 10 cases or 50 cases, the salary still stays the same. So we have a workload that much, that kind of, the incentive structure is kind of not there to support this notion of justice, but to move the court docket.
So race doesn't matter when it comes to elected prosecutors. That's coming from the scholar himself. And Mr. Obama's move was the right move. It was evidence-based. And criminal justice reform is something that we can't ignore. And that's because of you guys at home that are protesting. It's because of people like you that are in the ivory towers getting this research to share with me, people on the ground. This segment, Report and Research, again brought to you by Tabs 8, featuring 70 free stories of impact, issue, inspiration, and innovation. Tabs 8 is available for download now at techbookonline.com. We're going to be bringing you more segments like this in the coming week, so stay tuned. For Mr. Juwan Z. Bennett, I'm Flood the Drummer. Until next time, I'm drumming for justice.